silent or turn them off, all the better. The meeting is being filmed and a recording will be available on the Council's website. Anybody speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator. We're aware there is somebody already done that this morning. Karina, emergency evacuation procedure.
Thank you, Chair. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the illuminated green signs to the exit using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove, which is the green outside Browns and opposite Bath Abbey.
Apologies for absence and substitutions, please.
Yes, we have Councillor Ruth Malloy substituting for Councillor Toby Simon, Councillor Duncan Hounsell substituting for Councillor John Leach.
Declarations of interest. We have Councillor Hounsell to withdraw from the meeting for item 1. He can speak as a ward councillor. Councillor Jackson will declare item 3 and will leave the meeting up as well. Urgent business by the Chair. There is no urgent business by the Chair. Items to the public. Statements, declarations. Minutes of the meeting on the 17th of December. Are these the correct record, members, please? Jackson. Councillor, seconded by Councillor Crosley. All in favour, please? That's carried. Main plannings list. 22 Tyning Road, Saltford. Isabel, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is at 22 Tyning Road in Saltford. It's for the demolition of the existing bungalow on the site and the construction of 5 new bungalows, including a new access from Tyning Road. Just a small verbal update, a little amendment to condition 15, which is the compliance with the arboricultural method statement condition. Just the bit added that's highlighted on the screen, just to reference the report that was submitted, just to update that condition. So if members go with officer recommendation, this will be updated before the decision is issued. So the site location plan, so for those that came on the committee site visit, you'll remember that the site is on Tyning Road in Saltford. The site is occupied by a fairly substantial bungalow with garages and is quite a long site with a rather large rear garden. An aerial view of the site, so this is the bungalow here. You can see it indicated hopefully by my cursor, and then the garden extends up here. You'll see some trees on the site in this aerial image. They have actually been removed, quite a lot of them already, so this is just a slightly older image, and those who came on the site visit will have noted that. I just want to point out, whilst we're on this slide, there are a couple of other sort of similar arrangements to the proposals you'll see in a minute to the south here, this sort of extension of Tyning Road, where you can see that a small collection of bungalows have also been constructed. We actually walked up along this road on the site visit for those that were there, and then to the north on, I think it's Collingwood Road or Collingwood Close, another similar arrangement off of Tyning Road. So some site photographs for those who weren't there. So this is the property as existing. So the bungalow, you can see it's got some gable garages and gable detail into the front. And then just a couple more. So these are the neighbouring properties adjacent. And then this is a view just down to the other end of the road. This is the separation between the existing property and the dwelling next door. We did go into the neighbouring property. Those on the site visit will remember, number 24. And then this is the rear garden. So this one is stood with my back to the existing dwelling, just facing down the garden. So this property here is number 24C, Tyning Road. And then this is just looking at the rear elevation of the existing bungalow, and you can see the neighbouring property number 24, Tyning Road here. And then just walking down the garden, so there's some existing greenhouses. These will obviously be removed as part of the proposals. And then just a few more looking back towards the existing dwelling and the neighbouring properties along Tyning Road. So hopefully this, for those who weren't on the site visit, gives you a sense of just how long that garden is. I think it's around 90 metres. So the existing site plan, the existing building is the pink here with existing car parking spaces to the front, and then obviously there's the greenhouses and various other sort of garden paraphernalia as existing. And then the proposed site plan. So the existing bungalow will be demolished. The access will be created just here. You can see my cursor from Tyning Road. The width of the access is around 4.7 metres. And then we've got 5 new bungalows with a 4-bedroom bungalow fronting onto Tyning Road, and the other 4 bungalows will be 2-bedroom bungalows. So this is the bungalow type C, the chalet bungalow that will front onto Tyning Road. So you can see that, and I'll show you the floor plans in a moment, that there are rooms in the roof of this particular bungalow. As you can see here, so you've got the ground floor plan with 2 bedrooms, and then the first floor plan has 2 bedrooms in the roof with ensuite and bathroom. And then we've got bungalow type A1, which is the one that sits directly behind the 4-bedroom bungalow. All the other bungalows don't have any accommodation in the roof, so they're all contained on the first floor. So they've got fairly simple plan form, sitting room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms. Type A2, which is quite similar. Type B2, so this is one of the bungalows that sits towards the rear of the site, backing onto, I think it's Manor Road, behind the site. And then type B1, so again, B2 and B1 are kind of mirror images of each other almost, and both have 2 bedrooms as well. So officer recommendation is to delegate to permit, subject to the planning conditions as set out in the committee report, as well as the verbal update earlier, and a financial contribution for off-site tree planting, which is the equivalent of 12 off-site trees. I just wanted to remind members that paragraph 11D of the NPPF does apply to your decision-making today, because Baines cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. I've put it up on the screen, but essentially it says that where there are no relevant development plan policies, or the policies most important for determining the application are out of date, which they are considered to be in this case because we don't have a 5-year land supply, essentially you have to undertake the tilted balance. So if you are to find that there are any adverse impacts, they must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of permitting new housing. So I just wanted to remind members to consider that when debating and considering the planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Public speaking time now. Ruth Presswood, please. Councillor Jackson, a question first, please.
No, I would just ask, Chair, if you could request these 2 gentlemen to move, because it's not possible to see the bottom corner of the bar.
You can, please, yes, thank you. Hey, Ruth.
I can't see that far.
The button in front of you should press. Okay, you've got 3 minutes, Ruth. Okay.
Good morning. I live at 24 Tyning Road and speak on behalf of myself and the occupiers of 24C. We object to this proposal because it represents clear overdevelopment, causes significant harm to residential amenity and privacy. Without clear and complete detail, it is not possible to fully understand significant impacts on light, outlook, privacy or solar panel glare. Planning decisions must be based on robust evidence, which is absent here. No assessment has been provided to demonstrate that the proposal would avoid a significant loss of light, particularly given the proximity to shared boundaries. The proposal places new dwellings and gardens immediately alongside existing homes. This results in a significant loss of privacy and a sense of enclosure caused by the scale and intensity of development at the boundaries contrary to national policy. Bungalow A2 can only be accommodated through extensive excavation along the boundary with Beech Hedge at 24C. Beech has shallow roots and the proposed works would cause significant and irreversible damage, likely leading to decline or failure. Loss of this hedge would also significantly increase overlooking and loss of privacy. Over 60% of the replacement trees must be planted off-site, demonstrating that the site is overdeveloped. Existing habitats and screening vegetation will be removed almost entirely, resulting in significant biodiversity loss and further loss of privacy. This harm cannot be resolved by condition, and off-site planting does not mitigate on-site impacts. We are not objecting to development in principle and recognise the need to deliver new housing. However, the current proposal seeks to accommodate too many dwellings on this site. Removing 2 units would allow a more spacious and workable layout, significantly reducing harm to privacy, light, outlook, boundary vegetation and biodiversity. Alternatively, reversing the layout and using the existing drop curb at 22 Tyning Road would allow access to run alongside the boundary of 24 and 24C, materially improving privacy for neighbouring residents and avoiding the need for extensive excavation that threatens the beach hedge. As submitted, the proposal lacks critical information and causes significant and irreversible harm to residential amenity, privacy, boundary vegetation and biodiversity. This is an excessive density, and we respectfully ask the committee to refuse permission or require a fundamental redesign that can be commented on by residents. A scheme that pushes development against boundaries and forces mitigation off-site is the clearest sign of overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. John Blake, please.
Good morning,
You have
committee.
3 minutes.
Are we on? I'm the architect for the proposal and also speak for the applicant, Mrs. Sandy Veer, who lived at number 22 Tyning Road when she was a child. Her mum and dad loved their large garden, and large amounts of vegetables, fruit and even grapes in the greenhouses were grown up until 10 years ago when the garden became too much for them. They are now in retirement living accommodation, although Dad has Alzheimer's and will soon need to go into care home. Regarding the planning issues, I will use the list provided by Democratic Services in their guide to public speaking. This covers most of the points that have been discussed with your officers during the fine-tuning of the proposal, but also addresses the concerns raised by the local residents and are as follows. Firstly, the suitability of the site for proposed development. The location of this site is highly sustainable, being within the Saltford housing development boundary, 200 metres from the nearest bus stop, 250 metres from the shops, surgery and pharmacy. The site itself is nearly a quarter of a hectare in area. The existing bungalow is over 70 years old and is tired and has been extended many times during its life. It is an inefficient use of space and requires a lot of energy to heat. The plot is therefore a prime site for redevelopment. Secondly, design and layout. The site shares boundaries with 8 other properties. Therefore, all except the new house on the Tyning Road frontage will be single-storey bungalows designed to the nationally described space standards and to meet Category 2 accessibility. This prevents the possibility of overlooking, and being on the south side of the new access road enables the new dwellings to have south-facing back gardens. Whilst the density of this proposal is greater than that of the surrounding area, densification of existing sustainable locations is preferable to large-scale developments in Greenbelt. Thirdly, highway safety and parking. Objections have been made about the small amount of parking allocated to each dwelling. In accordance with council policy, a single parking space has been shown for each dwelling. There is, however, enough space to park an additional car on their forecourts or on the road, which is 4.7 metres wide and would allow space for an emergency vehicle to pass. Fourthly, the impact on residential amenity. The single-storey bungalows have been carefully positioned to prevent overlooking of the existing properties, and being on the north side and set about half a metre lower than their closest neighbours at numbers 24, 24A and 24C, they will not shade their gardens. In conclusion, there is growing pressure on the central government to put in place requirements for LPAs to ensure that they provide suitable housing for the ageing population. In Bath and North East Somerset, as in many areas in the UK, the provision of single-level accessible housing is a very small percentage of the new housing supply. Whilst 4 new retirement bungalows will not make a large impact on the lack of provision in Baines, it is these small developments within each locality in highly sustainable locations that will accurately provide for those people who wish to downsize, but only within their own community. Thank you.
Thank you. Done on time. Councillor Duncan Hounsell, please.
Good morning. Thank you for considering this application today, and thank you to everyone who attended the site visit on Monday. I welcome the late change made to the application, that is the reduction of the proposed 4-bedroom chalet bungalow at the rear of the plot to a 2-bed bungalow. The planning officer has recommended approval, but this application is before the committee precisely because the committee may be minded not to permit this application. My fundamental objection is that this application for a replacement 4-bedroom chalet bungalow and 4 additional 2-bed bungalows is overdevelopment of the plot, and with the consequences of that overdevelopment. The proposed layout seems cramped, with the 2-bed bungalows lacking reasonable space both inside and outside. Intention is said to be to create houses suitable for retirement living, but there's no way of securing that. Moreover, the bathroom and toilet appear too small for the needs of older people with mobility issues or wheelchairs, or older people who may have such issues in the future. There is no indication of future proofing or adaptability with wider doorways or ramps. Bain's policy expects generous internal space and plenty of natural light for such housing. Garden space is negligible and offers little opportunity for sunlight and for self-cultivation. The access road, in my opinion, is on the wrong side of the plot. If the plans were reflected in a mirror line to place the access road on the right-hand side of the plot, as seen from Tyning Road, this would reduce the loss of amenity to number 24 Tyning Road. Indeed, its future occupants of bungalow 22A, for example, that would suffer from loss of light, loss of privacy and overlooking, particularly if number 24 decided to raise a hedge. A redesign or reconfiguration of the whole plot could still allow the solar panels of bungalows A1, A2 and C to face southwards. Highways raise no objection, but an access road on the right-hand side would align with an already existing drop curve and afford a better sight line for vehicle access to the site. The proposed bungalows butt up against existing plot boundaries unnecessarily. Biodiversity net gain can only be achieved by the purchase of units off-site, which is of no benefit to the future occupants, to neighbours or to Salford Village. Off-site biodiversity unit purchases should only be used when the biodiversity gain cannot be achieved on-site. More biodiversity on-site could be achieved with a lower density of housing, say 4 or 3 properties, rather than the 5 proposed. Even though the arboricultural officer has withdrawn objection, the officer still states that revised plans retaining 5 plots, quote, is not considered ideal. Of the 20 replacement trees deemed required, only 7 or 8 are to be placed on site. Similar backland development nearby has been successful in planning terms with a lower density of houses. This proposal for 5 properties does not match this local vernacular density and precedent set close by. The layout proposed appears unnatural and cramped compared to the nearby similar development. I know that Baines lacks a 5-year housing land supply because the government has doubled the mandatory housing target. I'm aware of the so-called tilted balance in favour of applications because of that, and of the need to optimise the use of land. However, it refused this application for reason of overdevelopment of the plot, which exceeds the vernacular density and is out of keeping with the character and quality of the similar backland development nearby, contrary to policies D2 and D7. Refused because of unsatisfactory plot layout, unsatisfactory design, inadequate garden spaces, contrary to policy D6C. Refused for reason of the significant loss of amenity to future occupants of the site, contrary to policies D6A and D6B. Refused for reason of the excessive extent of the loss of biodiversity on site. Refused for reason of the inadequate protection for wildlife, especially bats. As the ecology officer wrote, multiple bat roost features will be required. The plot gives an opportunity for a better use of the available land. This development could be so much improved following a reduction in the number of dwellings to be built. I hope the applicant will reconsider and submit a better application. Refuse this application. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so Chris Warren.
I don't think we're on. I've got it. It's gone out again, okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this application. I'd just like to echo my agreement of the comments of Councillor Hansel and Ruth, who've come here today. As a resident of Saltford for 28 years, I understand the contribution that infill development has made to the housing stock in the village. This helps alleviate pressure on greenbelt incursion. However, it has to be appropriate and refrain from adversely affecting the character and amenities nearby. Smaller properties are to be welcomed for those who wish to downsize and remain within the village, releasing larger family homes onto the market. However, after observing the scene from an upstairs window in a neighbouring property and looking at the plans, 5 properties on this plot is overdevelopment of the site. Indeed, 2 of the proposed bungalows are right on the boundary line. Because of the density of buildings on the site, it has reduced the amount of parking spaces available and thus will add to the on-street parking on Tyning Road, which is already at a premium. Another concern is the loss of habitat to wildlife. There was plenty to be observed during my visit on what appears to be a long-standing and established smallholding. A reduction in the number of buildings down to 3 would be far less of an impact, would allow for wildlife to return and would be in keeping with the densities of nearby similar plots. In my role as Ward Councillor for Saltford and for the residents adversely affected by this application, I state my objection to the current plans and ask the committee to consider a reduction in the amount of buildings proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Henson now had to leave the room because he has a declared interest by making a predetermination when he spoke just now. He has to leave the room. That's it, part of the debate. Questions from officers, please, and members? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I was wondering if the officer could give us a sort of scientific definition of what overdevelopment is, because the various speakers have stressed this question of overdevelopment, and I'm not quite clear what might be considered. And related to that very much, I'm afraid I always think of Saltford as sort of village, sort of suburb. Would it not be right to consider this rather than accept what might be considered a more urban city centre type of density?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I don't know if I can give a scientific explanation, but in terms of overdevelopment, we as officers generally wouldn't refuse something just flatly on the basis of it being overdevelopment. We would want, and the committee need to consider what harms would arise from that. So would you consider perhaps overdevelopment in terms of does it have an adverse impact to character and appearance, for example, or does it cause an adverse impact to residential amenity because of the number of dwellings? So that's what the committee have to consider, is what the adverse impacts and effects are of the term overdevelopment, i.e. are there too many dwellings and what impacts do they cause? So that's what the committee need to consider. In terms of the second question, Saltford is a village. I mean, it's up for the committee to decide whether they think the development is in keeping and in character with this particular area. I mean, this aerial image does provide a snapshot for you. So, you know, from my personal and professional opinion, there's a range of plot sizes here, but there are some large dwellings in large plots. These plot sizes are smaller than a number of their neighbours, but there are a few smaller plots within the vicinity. So, in my professional opinion, there is a mix in terms of the character here, but Saltford is a village and is not kind of, you know, a city centre development sort of an area.
Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on sizes of things. So the 2 back bungalows, what sort of size is the outside area that they have? And secondly, internally, the question of disability, adaptation, are the bathrooms big enough for a wheelchair or people with limited mobility, and the same for the sort of possibilities of wider doorways and things like that? Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. I don't actually have the size of the outdoor spaces, but hopefully you can kind of see from this plan. So these 2 dwellings have this hatched area here is a small patio area, and then this is a kind of a grassed area to the rear. So the outdoor spaces are small. We don't have a policy in Baines which prescribes outdoor space sizes per bedroom, per size of dwelling, for example. Policy D6 does talk about amenity and does say that residents should have access to kind of sufficient external amenity spaces. So, it's for the committee to decide whether they think this is sufficient. I mean, there is room, in those gardens for a table and chairs to sit outside and enjoy a garden. So, from my perspective, I don't think that would be a justifiable reason to refuse the development on its own. But, of course, that's the committee's judgment. In terms of the internal areas, let me just find one of the site plans. So the design and access statement does set out that all of the dwellings are M42 accessible, so accessible to wheelchairs. Our policy H7, which talks about accessibility, actually only requires half of the dwellings on this site to be M42 accessible. There is a further typology, which is M43, which is a wheelchair also kind of includes some extra things for wheelchairs, so these don't have those, but they should be accessible for wheelchairs. There is also a condition on their requiring compliance with that policy, so from officers' perspective, they're policy compliant.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Okay, so two questions. One, question of density. It would appear to me that the density of this development is far more dense than the surrounding areas, including the adjacent development that's a similar project. Can you give any idea of how much that density has changed on this development?
I don't.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't think we could have both on at once. So I don't have the calculation for the density of this site, but I would agree with you. It is more dense than those to the north and to the south. I think I kind of use those more as a demonstration that there is backland development in the locality, so that's not kind of an alien feature to the character. The density is more dense than the surrounds. However, from my professional perspective and in the report, I don't think there's significant harm that kind of stems from that, but that's the judgment the committee would have to come to.
Thank you. So would you agree then that policy D2 allows us to look at spacing and density and give that serious consideration as a material consideration?
Yes, absolutely, and that is something the committee can consider. I would also raise that the NPPF does talk about making efficient use of land, so I think there's kind of two things that the committee needs to look at and balance there from the perspective of making the most efficient use of the space that you've got, but also, yes, whether the density is appropriate in this location. Thank
you. My second question is regarding the biodiversity net gain. Are you happy that a good balance has been struck here? Because it seems to me that there's an awful lot of the BNGs going to be offset, and the need to plant 12 trees off-site, which obviously are not going to benefit the residents of this estate or the new residents coming in. So are you happy that the balance that we've achieved on BNG is good?
So the biodiversity net gains regime does allow for off-site mitigation and off-site delivery of BNG. What we need to be sure as officers and decision makers is that they follow the mitigation hierarchy. So have they maximised opportunities for providing BNG on site, and then you move off-site. And I have set out in my report very honestly and clearly that yes, if there were less dwellings on this site, obviously there would be more opportunities for tree planting and biodiversity net gain. I've come to the judgment balancing that against the fact we don't have a 5-year land supply, the fact that the scheme, in my opinion, is acceptable from a character and appearance perspective, residential amenity, etc., and balancing against that, against making the best use of efficient use of land, that balance is struck. The committee could come to a different conclusion, but they would have to be able to identify the harms arising from that, and I would again highlight that the BNG regime does allow for off-site planting. We have our own tree replacement scheme within the planning obligations supplementary planning document, which also allows for off-site provision, and we have had revisions to the scheme. They have put in an extra tree at the request of officers, so we feel they've maximised opportunities on site. But yes, of course, if a dwelling was removed, you could clearly get more BNG and trees on the site.
Just very quickly, I've done a calculation just for the benefit of committee because there's been quite a discussion on density. It's about 25 dwellings per hectare is the density of this site because it's about a 0.2 hectare site and there's 5 dwellings. That is, for anyone who doesn't really look at densities a lot, that's quite a low density. If you're looking at a city centre site, you're looking sort of 60, 100 plus. So just to give you some context.
So we're looking at the density in context of this area, not a generalised, yeah, okay.
Any further questions, officers? Councillor Jackson?
Oh, I wondered if the officer could get up the plan that shows where the access road is, because I'm afraid I didn't quite get the point, having unfortunately missed the site visit, about the proposal that the access road should be where the dropped curb is for number 22, rather than where it's going to be, because it looked, well, if that could be explained, that'd be great.
So I think what residents are raising, and Councillor Hounsell raised in their representations at the beginning, is that there may be a preference to have the access road on this side, so to the south, so it runs along the boundary with those of number 24 here and number 24C. Because I think they feel that that would have less impact on those residents who reside in these properties, and it would then mean that you would shift these dwellings essentially to the other side of the plot, so I guess mirroring it, for want of a better word. There was conversation on site about the architectural choice for that, and I think it was largely to do with the fact that you would then have you would have south-facing gardens, you'd get better light and better solar PV output. So it was a design choice, and as I've said, officers consider that that is acceptable. The committee need to come to that judgment.
Could you just point out where the beech tree is, because that change would presumably impact on it?
So I believe it was the beech hedgerow that runs along between these properties here. The arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan would require sort of tree protection measures, and that is secured by the condition, but the beech hedge runs between the boundary, that was what's being referred to.
Councillor Malloy?
Yeah, thank you. My question is for the highways officer. Looking at the reports, because you don't have any objections, it's interesting to note that the pre-application was for the construction of 6 bungalows, so I'm not quite sure how they would all have fitted in, but anyway, so 5 is an improvement, but still a large number. But my question is more kind of general, really, about these access roads. So you think it would be of an approved quality, but will it be adopted or not? And if it isn't, then is it a question for all the future residents to kind of agree on future maintenance costs? How does that work, please? Thank you.
Simple answer is no, this would not be adopted. The Highway Authority would never adopt a development of this scale with no through route, so it would be a private maintained area for the residents to look after.
Councillor McPhee?
Could you give us the dimensions of the gardens of the 2 buildings at the end of the site? They seem to look particularly small.
Thank you. No, I'm afraid I don't have those measurements to hand. There is a scale bar actually at the top of this plan, which goes sort of 2, 4, 6 metres, so that might give you some indication, but I don't have the measurements and I wouldn't want to quote them incorrectly.
Is there any guidance about the size of a garden?
No, we don't have any policy. Oh, sorry.
Okay, any further questions at all? Councillor Malloy?
Just thought there was one of the comments or mentioned concern about foul sewer drainage, but is that a planning consideration for us or not? And can you give any more information about that?
Yes, so that would be a consideration. I actually didn't include the drainage plan in this presentation, so apologies for that, but there was some back and forth between the applicant and the drainage team looking at the drainage and the ability to connect to the foul sewer. So the drainage team are happy with the proposed drainage arrangement. You will note that there is a pre-commencement condition and there should be a pre-commencement condition somewhere with regards to drainage, to secure a drainage scheme. And, yeah, as I say, there's no objection from the drainage team.
Okay, no further questions. The item is open for debate. Who starts us off? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Okay, so I would agree with the applicant in as much as it's a sustainable location and there's a need for bungalows. I'm afraid that's where we then start to differ. For me, this is a clear overdevelopment. To try and put five properties into this area, the density is far greater than any of the surrounding areas. For me, it doesn't. That clearly doesn't comply with our policy D2 on density and spacing. Secondly, I have got concerns about the biodiversity net gain and the offset. I believe that the balance is wrong. I think there's too much of this is being offset off-site, where it should be accommodated on-site, and it should benefit the residents that are going to be moving into these developments, not to some unknown, undisclosed field somewhere else in the country. So I have an issue with the BNG. There is, for me, I think there is a clear loss of amenity, both to the existing residents and potentially to the new residents moving on to this site, because they will be living in bungalows that are surrounded by taller buildings. So I think there is a clear loss of amenity. I think that there's a clear breach to policies D7 and D6. And having been to visit number 24, the loss of amenity from looking from their upstairs windows was quite clear as well. I think there's also, I appreciate that this meets the parking standards, but it's very difficult not to meet parking standards these days. So I do believe that although it meets the parking standards, practically, I don't think it really accommodates for this type of accommodation, particularly when you have visitors that will be difficult to accommodate visitors on site. The access road is too narrow for parking, which means that visitor parking is probably going to be on Tyning Road, which we've already seen is already has an issue with parking. So for those reasons, I shall not be supporting the application.
Are you moving that, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Okay, if Hughes was moving, have you got the reasons now, Chris?
I've got some.
Okay. Is there a second of that, all, please? Councillor McPhee? I've got next. Do you want to speak now, Hal? Okay. Councillor Gorley?
I think we need more bungalows. I think we need more houses for people to downsize into. I am concerned, particularly with the bottom left-hand back bungalow, quite what light and outside space they'll have. And I suppose I echo to a certain extent the concern about the biodiversity net gain. So we've had a similar application or a parallel application from Coombe, which we decided was too tight and too overdeveloped, and I'm sort of tending towards that way with this, although I think the fact it's gone from 6 to 5 is good, but it's still quite tight, and that does concern me.
Councillor Crossley?
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know where to start on my objection to this. This is one of the most overdeveloped schemes I've seen for a long time. It is, and I don't think we should be worried too much about the fact that the government has just doubled our target, housing target overnight, despite the fact that it took us 10 years to get agreement with our communities across Baines for a set number. To double it overnight without any chance to debate it is a problem, but I don't think that should mean that we have to put up with developments like this. This is, in my view, massive overdevelopment. It is completely inappropriate development in a village like Salford. I think even in the centre of Bath, we would be concerned about this, with no space around, or very little space around the houses. So I'm more than happy to be supporting the refusal on the grounds outlined by previous councillors of overdevelopment, inappropriate development, loss of biodiversity not gained, whatever you like. I think this fails on a number of reasons. You know, I have full respect for Isabel. She is an excellent planning officer, and on previous meetings I have supported every one of her applications that come here. But on this, I reach a completely different conclusion to her.
Councillor Tim Warren.
Thank you, Chair. If you look at actually what you're looking at, I think it's fine. I haven't got the issue so much with the overcrowding and the small gardens, because if you don't want a small garden, you don't buy it. Simple as that. And so I just think taken on its own. However, the area it's in is not that density. If that was new on a high density building site, it's one thing. But the reality is it's not. It's on a lot lower density area. And I think just to plonk that in the middle of it is not in keeping. And I totally agree with my colleagues that have spoken up to now. And as it is and where it is, couldn't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
So can you all hear me, or is it working? Right. I think this is a difficult one. If it had come in as an outline application or as a development in principle, I wouldn't have had any problem with it, because as the officer rightly said, we have an obligation to use land efficiently. However, the way the context of Salford, which I may not have been on the site visit, but I have done a fair amount of leafleting around and walking the pavements and so on, I really can't see it's in character. And how to put it, it's just too concretey. A different sort of development, maybe with semi-detached houses, I would have been happy with, but I think Councillor Hughes has put the arguments very well, and it's the lack of how to put it, green patches, the lack of any focus for your hedgehog. I mean, it's going to clear out any sort of bird life, wildlife and so on. So I will be supporting Councillor Hughes.
Any further speakers? None. Chris, can I get you to clarify, please?
Okay, thank you. So, as I understand it, the motion on the table, I counted 4 potential reasons that have been put forward, primarily linked to overdevelopment of the site, relating to the density being far greater than the surrounding area. And I'm taking that to be an issue to do with the character of the development compared to the surrounding area. There's also concern about what that means in terms of loss of amenity and the overbearing impact on, for example, number 24. There are a couple of other points that were raised about parking standards. I know, Councillor Hughes, you said that you accepted that it did meet the parking standards, but it's easy for everything to meet the parking standards. Unfortunately, the point of having a standard is something for developers to be able to apply. It's something for officers and developers to be able to apply consistently, and it's very hard for us to. It would be very hard for us to mount a reasonable defence on an appeal for a develop against a scheme that does meet our parking standards, that are published, the council's parking standards. They've met them. We've asked them to do that. They've met them, and then we've said that's not good enough. So my advice is that reason is going to be very difficult for us to defend. Obviously, it's still open to you to maintain that reason, but I would request you just perhaps think about that and perhaps clarify. And then on the BNG sort of hierarchy point, I think there is an issue here in that the way the BNG system is operated is that it does permit you to go down that hierarchy and to look at off-site credits, off-site units, and the benefits are not always intended for local people. It's nature for nature's sake quite often. So again, I feel we would probably very much struggle to defend that reason. So I'd just ask you to reconsider that. On the other 2 points around the overdevelopment character and amenity points, those are reasonable things that the officers would attempt to defend. Obviously, our view is we don't think that would be successful in defending those. And I would just remind members again about the point raised at the end of Isabel's presentation about this tilted balance. It is a very significant consideration. I know the housing targets have changed overnight in the sense that the government have doubled our figures, but that is and we haven't had much experience of that here in Baines before, but looking nationwide and looking at the trend for appeal decisions, it's a very significant consideration that you should weigh heavily in your minds, and that means that you may be able to identify some harm on this scheme, but the harm has to be significantly and demonstrably outweighing the benefits being, in this case, the provision of 5 houses, in a, as we've heard in the debate, a sustainable location. And we do have that housing need. So I know our housing target has doubled, and we might disagree over the figures or whatever, but there is undoubtedly a housing need in this area. So just to have that in your mind, and if I could just ask those clarifications on the 2 parts of the reasons. Sean.
Mr. Hughes?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with your appraisal. The parking standards, yes, I agree. I mean, it's ridiculous that we've got a maximum rather than a minimum in parking standards, but it is what it is, so I agree that that's not a material issue that we could apply in this instance. But yeah, I think the BNG balance is relevant. Whether you tie that in with overdevelopment and a lack of green space, that's up to you. But the fact that the overdevelopment has resulted in a lack of green space and trees on site, and forced a need for an off-site, and I think too many going off-site. But as I say, I'll leave you to decide how that.
Just to interpret that, I could certainly agree that we could take the point around the lack of green space within the overdevelopment point. Yeah. So if it was overdevelopment to do with character and appearance and amenity and lack of green space, that would be how I would summarise what I think you're aiming at.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm happy with that. And to be honest, I don't think anyone in this room has said that they're against the principle of this design. If it had come in as free houses, perhaps there would be a different result. But no, I agree with your appraisal. Thank you.
Is the Secretary happy with that as well, please? Hal? Are you content what's been said?
Yes, I just wanted to say that if I look at the developments of developers and look at the size of the gardens, typically speaking, they would be at least twice the size of those gardens there. And the other thing is that if we're going to turn down something, then I can see the problem. But we're not turning it down, we're just trying to make it well designed. So in terms of tilting balance, I don't see the argument at all. We're quite happy for that land to be developed. It's just the quality of the bill.
Thank you, Hal. Councillor Jackson?
I may have missed something, but I take it there's no Salford neighbourhood plan, because if this development were in Westfield, and sorry to always use that as the as the criteria, it would not meet the Westfield neighbourhood plan parking standards, and it would definitely be refused on the grounds of overdevelopment of a back garden.
There isn't a Salford neighbourhood plan, just to confirm. Not a made one.
Okay, we are going to the vote now on refusal. Those in favour, please. That's unanimous. The item is refused. Ben, do you want to come forward, please? Yeah, present Duncan, please. Okay, a couple of seconds, please, while the room's cleared. Just waiting for the officer to be organised a minute. So we have a few technical problems, but we'll be shortly. We'll take a 2-minute conference break if anyone wants for a moment. Okay, so use your toilet, please go now. Okay, we have a quick conference break a minute, then we'll just back. A few minutes, Ben, have a quick conference break. Okay, we're all back in the room now. On the second item of the agenda is the Barn Belbrook Lane. Ben Burke, would you like to present your report, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry for the technical issues there. This is an application for change of use of a barn to a dwelling house. So it's located north of, in Bath Easton, so at the northern fringe of Balebrook. So I'm just showing you the site location plan. The site is accessed off Balebrook Lane, past the existing dwelling within the ownership, so Vine House, and there's a lane that runs past that building, past the replacement house that's being built at the moment, and there's a track that continues on and reaches this building. Just to show it in a bit more detail, so that's the barn building. It shows the curtilage, existing and proposed planting. So just zooming in, so you can see it has a sort of tight residential curtilage to the rear, parking to the east, a small parking area for 3 vehicles. There's existing trees at the boundary of neighbouring properties, at the boundary at the end of Long Gardens. The area to this area here, you can see the wedge shape to the left. That's an area of new planting proposed as enhancement to visual amenity. I'm just going to go back. So, yeah, in terms of the proximity to neighbouring properties, you can see it's a very significant distance from the neighbouring properties. The closest property to the south, you can see, has a very long garden, and its garden adjoins it, but it adjoins the very end of a long garden, and the site is sort of elevated from those properties. So yeah, so showing you the aerial photograph. You can see earthworks there where there is a new construction being built. That's in progress at the moment, likely to complete during the summer. You can see its location north of the urban boundary of the area. You can see polytunnels, etc., other agricultural structures on the site. So this is the building. The caravans are there in connection with the new house that's being built. That's welfare accommodation, welfare facilities for the construction workers. So that's completely separate, and they will obviously go once the replacement building has been built. So you can see the timber-clad barn. The ground floor at the moment is in agricultural storage use. The upper floor is in office use. So it had prior approval for the office use at the upper floor. The proposal is to convert to a single dwelling. There are very few changes proposed to the building, and I'll show you that when we come to the elevations. So just showing you to the rear and to the side. Okay, so these are the existing elevations. So at the moment you've got an external staircase at the rear. So the proposal doesn't change this very much. It removes the external staircase and largely utilises the existing openings. So this is the plan that was superseded. I thought I'd show this first. So the original scheme that came in had a significant number of windows in the south elevation. It had an extension on the north elevation. So the thinking there was the narrow extension at the rear, at the north, wasn't particularly rural in character, not particularly typical of what you'd get with a rural building. So that was removed. So there's no extensions to the building. Looking at the south elevation, the array of smaller windows there gives it very much a domestic appearance and looks somewhat sort of incongruous in terms of that building, and it was considered that introducing those elements was going to be harmful to the rural character and appearance of the area. So those were all taken out, except for 1 or 2 windows, and the accommodation is orientated to the north, utilising the existing openings. So this is the revised scheme. So you can see it utilises all the existing openings on all sides. There's one small window proposed first floor in the south elevation. That's to a non-habitable room. And as we've seen, the properties in the localities are a significant distance away from this property, and there's intermediary screening in terms of trees and existing vegetation. But yeah, non-habitable room, otherwise existing openings. Okay, so I'll just run through the key issues on this one. So in terms of Greenbelt, it's compliant with paragraph 154G of the MPPF, so that requires that the proposal doesn't cause substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. The building is largely being retained as it is. There's a small residential curtilage, so there's an element of domestic character introduced, but actually it's a small area, the curtilage. It's quite very minor, the changes, physical changes, very limited in terms of retaining existing openings. So really it can't be said that the proposal would result in substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. So it passes the Greenbelt test and isn't inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. So turning to our policy concerning the conversion of rural buildings, RE6, I'll just go over the main areas, the main criteria. So the building is not typical to a lot of agricultural buildings in that it's tall and narrow, but it's with its timber-clad external walls, so the timber-boarded walls, its general shape and proportions. It is in general in keeping with a rural building suitable for, that's in keeping with this rural fringe location. So it does have characteristics of an agricultural building. It's a permanent construction and doesn't require any significant alteration or rebuilding at all. So it's a permanent building of substantial construction. The proposal with the extra planting, extra tree planting, proposed hedge planting, etc., would actually enhance visual amenity and provide some screening of this building to surrounding residential properties. It's not in an isolated location, it's right on the edge of the urban area of Bath, so it passes that criteria, and it wouldn't result in any replacement agricultural building. There's a prior approval agricultural building that's being built to the west of this at the moment, and that will provide all the storage needs for the agricultural enterprise on the site, which is a modest agricultural enterprise consisting of an organic vineyard and also organic apple trees producing juice. And also the existing building, the agricultural port on it quite clearly specifies that the building concerned isn't appropriate for modern agricultural use. The size of the openings are very small, so in terms of the equipment that's needed to be stored, it would be difficult to do it in this building without very significant alteration. So the barn that's being built at the moment, that's of a size that it can accommodate the larger agricultural machinery and facilities that are needed for the operation. So it won't harm the conservation area or the national landscape, again because very minimal changes to the building and the site. No harm to residential amenity, given very limited openings and distance from residential properties. In terms of traffic and transport, it's going to be very little difference to the existing situation with office accommodation and agricultural store. If anything, potentially a reduction in traffic and traffic flow to and from the site. So no highways issues or impact on the rights of way that runs along the track leading up to the building. And in terms of ecology, as there are minimal openings, it doesn't result in significant light pollution, potentially that could affect protected species. So there's just a couple of very small updates I would like to add, just additional to the update sheet. So, in the comments section, I had specified, my response to comments made by third parties with regard to C3, C4 use, HMO use, I'd specified that the use would need to comply with C3 use. Just to correct on that, because this building is outside the urban area of Bath, there is a permitted change from C3 to C4, so it could be C3 or C4 use with small-scale HMO. So just to clarify on that, but the proposal that's put forward is a C3 single dwelling. Just to clarify that condition 9 on the update sheet replaces condition 3 on the delegated report, and would seek delegated authority just to reorder the conditions. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ben. On the speaker time now, Councillor Peter Lewis, please.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you. This is Greenbelt within the Cotswold National Landscape and in the setting of Salisbury Hill and the Bath World Heritage Site. So it's not an ordinary site, it's sensitive, it's very visible, and it's used constantly by the public with the footpath running immediately above it. Our objection is straightforward. This is inappropriate development in protected countryside, and it adds a residential, urbanising use into a place where policy is meant to protect openness and rural character. And importantly, it doesn't come in isolation. It's part of a much wider pattern of incremental change on this landholding that's steadily chipping away at the landscape. Sadly, the visuals provided at the start, the aerial view, does not show the current extent. Residents have already watched this area change dramatically in just a few short years. Trees removed, hard standing laid, earthworks and berms introduced, confining fencing along the public right-of-way, and large new structures where there used to be open land. What used to feel like countryside now feels more like a private compound, with the footpath squeezed and views degraded. And this barn cannot be looked at on its own. It sits alongside the replacement dwelling development at Vinehouse, often referred to as Bath Springs. Work has continued there despite the long-standing expectation and condition that the original house, Vinehouse, would be demolished as part of that permission. If that condition was there to prevent multiple dwellings in such a sensitive location as Salisbury Hill, then approving another residential unit here directly contradicts that principle and makes the planning framework look inconsistent. And members should be in no doubt about the visual impact already created at Vinehouse. Bath Springs is now visible well beyond the site. You can see it from the canal path between Bath and Bath Easton, and you can see it from Sally in the Wood looking towards Salisbury Hill. If it's that prominent at that distance, then approving further residential change here can only deepen that cumulative harm. On the agricultural appraisal, the point is simple. The question isn't whether the barn is perfect for the biggest modern machinery. The question is whether it can serve an agricultural purpose. The Parish Council's view is that it remains a functional rural building, and conversion is a disproportionate response to what are, at most, minor operational constraints. There are also practical harms. Balebrook Lane is narrow and already under pressure. A new dwelling brings permanent domestic activity, more visitor movements and more service traffic in a place that is fundamentally unsuitable for it. And finally, Chair, one human point. This is the foothills of Salisbury Hill. People don't just pass through it, they live with it. It's where we walk daily, where neighbours stop to talk, where we take in the open countryside, those wide defining views. And whilst the land may be privately owned, a place like this demands stewardship. Ownership brings rights, but it also brings responsibilities. It's a shared asset, and once those views and that sense of place are gone, they will not be recovered. So we are asking you to refuse this application, at least until all conditions related to ongoing developments are met, and uphold greenbelt and landscape protections. You cannot protect a landscape by approving its erosion in instalments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Angela Thomas, please.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. This site lies on the foothills of Salisbury Hill within the Cotswold National Landscape. A well-used public footpath runs directly through it, and forms an important access route to Salisbury Hill. The footpath is valued for its views, tranquillity and landscape character, and the local plan is explicit that great weight should be given to conserving the scenic beauty and special qualities of designated landscapes such as this. Over the past decade, this site has been subject to more than 20 planning applications. The cumulative result has been extensive tree removal, new buildings, access works and major earthworks. What was once a wooded meadow with the original barn hidden from view has become an exposed and intensively developed landscape dominated by large structures. The character of this part of the Cotswold National Landscape has already been fundamentally altered. We object to this application on 4 grounds. Firstly, harm to the character of the Cotswold National Landscape. The incremental development of this site has already caused unacceptable landscape harm. Converting the barn to a dwelling would represent a further step in the suburbanisation of a landscape that local plan policy NE2 requires to be conserved and enhanced, not further degraded. Members should consider the cumulative impact, not the proposal in isolation. Secondly, loss of amenity along the public footpath. The footpath passes immediately beside the barn. Its value lies in its rural and tranquil setting. A residential use would introduce garden curtilage, lighting, noise, access changes and domestic activity, fundamentally changing the experience of this route for the public. Third, biodiversity harm. The site supports protected species, including bats and badgers. Tree loss and disturbance have already reduced wildlife presence. Further residential use would intensify human activity and lighting, placing additional pressure on sensitive habitats. Finally, lack of local need or justification. The local plan seeks to direct new housing to locations where it meets identified needs and supports sustainable communities. There is no evidence that this dwelling meets any identified local or affordable housing need. And if members are minded to approve it despite these harms, we ask that any permission is strictly conditioned to prevent use as a holiday let or short-term accommodation. Such use would increase disturbance to neighbours and would not contribute to meeting any housing needs. This application represents further incremental harm to landscape, biodiversity and public amenity without demonstrable public benefit. For all of these reasons, we respectfully urge members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Chris Dance, please.
Sure, Councillor Crossley. Well, it's a decision for you, ultimately. You need to ask yourself, I understand this is an other registrable interest. Does it affect the finances or well-being of you? Does it affect the finances or well-being of one of my other registrable interests? So the question is, arguably, could it affect the well-being of the interest you have? I don't believe the board has taken any position on the application. So if you assume that the well-being of the ORI, as I abbreviate it, is affected, then you go on to ask yourself, am I affected to a greater extent than most people, and would a reasonable person think my judgment is clouded? So if you reach the conclusion that yes, you're on that side of the table, then you have an interest and must disclose it. I may speak, you may speak as a member of the public, but not to discuss or vote, and must leave the room. If you decide no, you are, still with an open mind, you're not biased, if you like, you declare it, but you can take part. So it's your decision.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So, Chair, if I can say, the previous time I declared one, the Cotswold National Landscape had actually registered an objection to the plan. So I thought that was a conflict, and I withdrew from the consideration of that. As the Cotswold National Landscape hasn't made a determination on this one, and as I serve on the Cotswold National Landscape purely as the Council's representative on that body, I feel I can stay and take part in the debate and the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. Chris Dance, please.
Members, prior to making this application, we followed good practice and submitted a pre-application submission, as I always do with applications, if we want to agree or find where areas of challenge are in a planning application. Now, this was an extremely productive process whereby we received an extremely constructive response from the officers. Accordingly, we then progressed to make a formal application. And throughout the determination process, we have continued the constructive dialogue with the officers, as evidenced by the amended plans which the officer put on the screen. The result of that comprehensive process was a full report that you have before you today. This analyses all the key planning issues and recommends approval. And I'd just like to highlight the salient points. In terms of green belt policy, the report articulates the scheme's fully compliant in respect to green belt policy. This is a rural conversion scheme. Policy RE6 comes into play. There's 8 criteria which need to be addressed. The officer's report meticulously addresses each one and demonstrates that it's complied with. Thereafter, given the subtle changes to the building, which I hope you'll see from the plans, it's been demonstrated in the officer's report there's no harm to the Bath Conservation Area, the setting of the World Heritage Site, or the Cotswolds National Landscape. Finally, the report addresses detailed matters. These are in respect of the impact on residential properties where there's no harm, the transport aspects of the proposal, which are acceptable, and that all ecological issues have been addressed. I also note that in the report and in the update sheet, there's a whole schedule of conditions. These are all agreed and will be complied with. To conclude, members, this scheme comes before you after extensive discussion and collaborative working with the officers, which has been positive. You have before you an officer report. You'll be aware this is a development plan-led system, that you have to address issues in an objective manner, and the officer report articulates that all of those have been fully complied with. Members, I'm going to finalise my representation to you by saying, please, I urge you to follow the clear professional advice in your officer reports and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Questions from officers, please? Oh, sorry, Joanna. I apologise profusely. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. This planning application sits on the flanks of the world-famous Salisbury Hill, part of the historic Bath skyline and managed by the National Trust. From many locations within Baines, this site can be observed, for example, from the Canal Towpath, Claverton Valley or Barthampton Down. This site is of local and national treasure. In the 2017 dispute about the rights or wrongs of a park and ride on the east of Bath, the former landowner of the proposed barn conversion placed large signs just above this application to demonstrate their views on plans in the valley. They were seen by everyone. This location is unique and special to many in my community. Formally, this application sits in Bath Avon North Ward. However, the ward councillors seem unable to represent on this application. Directly next to this site sits Lambridge Ward, and many residents in the area have contacted me on this application, as well as on the ongoing issues at the site suggesting to me mismanagement. I've had to meet officers from planning enforcement to discuss these various issues. Under the present stewardship, mature trees have been damaged or felled, the old woodlands severely cut back, and piles of excavated earth from the current building development dumped onto what was once open meadowland. This application will directly impact local residents' loss of privacy. These proposed changes to the barn, which sits in an elevated position, directly overlooks the rear gardens of 201 to 209 Balebrook Lane, adding 3 new south-facing windows, including one at the first floor level, directly overlooking neighbouring homes. They ask that if permission is granted, that this committee removes the first floor south-facing window. Local residents and Lambridge Ward councillors also question why a high-rise report has not been sought. There are many safety issues at the site, which is a well-used public rights-of-way connecting Bath Eastern to Balebrook. This proposed private residence with parking for 3 vehicles and vehicle access will increase conflict between vehicles and walkers. eroding the historic rural and safe character of this public footpath, which has been in situ for hundreds of years. It is highly likely that there will be an increase of vehicle traffic on Bellbrook Lane with this permission, a designated access-only road, though this access-only route is already regularly abused by vehicles, and increased traffic will further impact concerns for road safety by residents, a regular issue in my inbox. The barn was originally permitted on the basis that it remained screened, yet the trees required to hide it were removed and never replaced. Further tree loss contradicts with policy NE2 and NE5, and residents report a clear decline in local wildlife. In 2019, the previous owner applied to convert this barn into residential premises, and the council then and planning inspectress on appeal refused permission. Nothing seems to have changed except that this proposal is even more ambitious. The development does not contribute to affordable housing under policy CP9 and is unlikely to meet local needs, raising concerns about future short-term lets. It would also be inconsistent to approve the scheme while another nearby dwelling, The Springs, was only permitted on condition that an existing house was demolished. The landowner states that agricultural activity on the site is year-round and labour-intensive, with the orchard producing juice and the vineyard likely to be productive in the next couple of years. So why is this barn not being used for agricultural activities? Or is the application using recent national ledger changes that allow conversion of agricultural buildings to homes because of the value of this site? Bath Preservation Trust have also commented on this application, citing Baines Council policies that are material to the determinations of the application, including CP8, GB1, CB3. The NPPU states development in the Greenbelt is inappropriate unless one of the following exception applies: the extension or alteration of a building, provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. The design and access statement states the existing volume of the building is 690 metres cubed, with the additional stairwell being 71 metre cubed. This equates to a 10.3% increase in size. This increase does not seem to appear to acknowledge the curtilage of the increase for vehicles and bike storage as well. Baines Council has a policy on lighting, D8. Given the location of the subject building, due regard should be given to the dark skies of the Green Belt setting and World Heritage Site and the Cotswold National Landscape. Bath Preservation Trust is working towards a dark sky reserve status, and approval would impact that work. I am grateful to the Chair and the Vice Chair of this committee that they recognise that this proposal sits on the borderline of policies that allow variations in interpretation, which makes it a complex case. For these reasons, I urge the Council to uphold its policies, protect the Greenbelt and the landscape setting, and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any questions from officers? Councillor Hensel.
Thank you. I've got two questions. A number of the speakers have been referring to the cumulative impact of development in that area, and stating that if this is not really the last straw, it's a straw. So I'd like some clarity from the legal officer or the senior planning officer. Are we obliged to look at this in isolation, standalone, or are we to take any notice of other related activity?
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Yes, I've heard similar comments being made about various matters. So it'd be really important. I think there are various things that fall outside of this application. So reference to things that haven't been done on other applications. Those are enforcement matters or matters that don't pertain particularly to this application. Obviously, what has happened on site and what is there currently and what has permission is relevant, because that is forming the existing baseline, as it were. So you can take into account the cumulative impact of developments insofar as those are relevant, but you're not judging those other things. You are judging the application that's in front of you today, which is a conversion of an existing building.
Thank you. My second question, for now anyway, is that as Councillor Wright said in her address, she referred to national legislation. conversion of redundant agricultural buildings to residential use in Greenbelt has actually been encouraged by government, past and present. So I want to understand really why this particular application has come to the committee. If that is the case, what actually are the particular features of this application that we should be focusing on?
So it's come to committee because it was called in by members and the parish council for a wide range of reasons. There, as you say, there is prior approval procedures under PD to be able to convert farms to residential. It goes through the prior approval process rather than the normal planning application process, and those cases wouldn't come to committee. There is a prior approval process for change of use of office to residential, and that doesn't apply in this instance because the date that the office was implemented falls outside the provision of that part of the GPDO. So that's why this has come in as a full planning application. So in terms of the call-in, members have raised various issues similar to what's been they presented in their representation. Issues about transport, traffic, issues about character of the area, issues about harm to Greenbelt, harm to national landscape, concern about HMO use. I think those are the main points, but a full range of issues. And they've also raised the issue about the risk of potentially more agricultural buildings being needed. That's the main points raised.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. So, I mean, first of all, I understand this was built around 2016 under permitted development, so it didn't actually require planning permission to build the barn. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm not sure the specific date, but I think it's around that period. So yeah, it was built under prior approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet now it's not suitable to be a barn, and it's more suited to be residential. So what's changed in that period that it's no longer suitable as a barn and it now needs to become residential?
At the time that prior approval application was considered, it was determined by officers that the development was reasonably necessary for the purposes of agriculture and for the purpose of agriculture within that site. Certainly the agricultural use of the site has changed. There's a new owner moved into the site a few years ago. They've changed the agricultural operation, so they're introducing an organic vineyard and organic apple trees for juice. So the operation is different, so that would have some bearing on it.
But a barn is needed because they've built a new one.
Yeah, so they had prior approval for an additional barn, and the officer took the view on that was reasonably necessary for the purposes of agriculture based on the information submitted.
Okay. And was the new barn under permitted development as well?
Yeah, so the new barn there, that was under agricultural permitted development, yeah.
Okay. If I may, I have a couple more questions. Simple question, is this in the housing boundary?
No, it falls outside the settlement boundary, it's in the Greenbelt.
Thank you. And we saw when we visited, the access was very challenging in terms of the access to the site. The main road was a single lane, very narrow, and the access on site was a mud track. So is there anything in here that's going to mitigate that or improve the access going forward?
So Balebrook Lane is a lane and it's narrow in places. The access to the site, there is mud on the track at the moment to do with partly as a result of the construction work that's ongoing, but that is considered to be a suitable track for the use. So the access isn't considered to be an issue. And in terms of the use proposed, it's not considered that it's going to generate any additional traffic than the existing use of the building.
Hey, just to be clear, the mud that's on the track at the moment is there because it's a mud track, not because of the construction traffic. It is a muddy track, isn't it? It's not tarmac.
It's not tarmacked, no. It's suitable for vehicles at the moment, but that is something, if members were concerned about, that is something that a condition could be applied about upgrading or surfacing of that track.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one final, if that's okay? So it's been raised that this is an inappropriate development in the green belts. Are we saying that policy RE6 then opposes that view, or would you consider this is an inappropriate development in the green belts?
Yeah, so Greenbelt largely turns on national policy. Our local plan policies refer you back to the national policies, and there have been obviously changes there over the last year in terms of the revised NPPF. And with the most pertinent or most relevant paragraph is 154G, and that allows for change of use, redevelopment and change of use of existing buildings to residential dwellings, providing they don't cause substantial harm to the openness of the green belt. So that's a very, very high bar, and it's not considered this proposal would result in substantial harm to the green belt, given the limited changes proposed. So on that basis, it's then appropriate development in the green belt, and there isn't an objection in terms of green belt policy.
Sorry, so in terms of policy NE2A then, you would say your interpretation of NE2A is this is compliance with NE2A?
NE2A is about landscape, I understand, and the national landscape. In terms of our policies where they refer to Greenbelt, they have effect being superseded by the changes to the MPPF. So that's where we need to go to. And if this scheme doesn't result in substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, then there's no objection in terms of Greenbelt policy, and national policy dictates that it's appropriate development in the Greenbelt.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hughes has covered quite a bit of what I wanted to ask. And I sort of gather that we're not meant to take into account the fact that it would appear from the developments over the last decade that there's a sort of creeping development of this area. So that my question is this green belt or a development on a green space, or is it a grey area, which, I mean, as I understand it, the government policy is that we should be developing grey areas before we think about green belt, or that's my question. Is this really the only appropriate site? And secondly, can you explain, I've always understood that any development in the green belt was inappropriate, full stop, unless, of course, there are very special circumstances like the need for an agricultural worker's home to look after alpacas or something. But this is not the case here, is it? This is not a redundant building. It's just a building that doesn't suit the present purpose of the present owner. And, you know, it's like when you have teenage kids and you find you haven't got enough space. The obvious thing to do is to buy a larger house, not have an inappropriate extension in a green belt. So can you sort of clarify these issues, please? Why could we permit this when it may not suit the needs of the present owner, but once this conversion's done, it's gone forever? And I presume the office is in use at the moment.
So to run through those queries, grey belt in terms of the MPPF you consider Greybout where the proposal, well, it'd be relevant to consider Greybout where the proposal is not in accordance with the development plan. In this instance, the proposal is in accordance with the development plan, so there isn't a requirement to go on and consider whether this site is Greybout land. In terms of Greenbelt exception, policy RE6 is an exception to the normal locational policies which directs development to settlements and not to the rural area. Because it's the conversion of a rural building, that policy allows that as an exception to that locational policy, and that's replicated in national policy. And I should confirm, yes, this is Greenbelt. It's outside the settlement boundary. It's very close to it, but it's outside it. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Jackson?
I don't agree with you, but I take on board what you're saying. The other question is sustainable location. As somebody who doesn't drive, I'm not sure that going up and down this lane is safe or sound, and it's muddy. And where is the nearest bus stop?
So, in terms of its location, it's just next to, it's close to the edge of the urban area of Bath. But obviously, to reach that, you need to travel along the track and on Balebrook Lane. So, getting to the facilities on foot would be problematic. So it would likely involve use of a car, but the building is in very close proximity to the edge of the urban area. So we can't consider this to be in a remote, unsustainable location. So in terms of the criteria of RE6, it talks about not being in an isolated location. So we can't consider this in an isolated location because it's literally on the edge of a settlement. And yes, it would involve potentially a car journey to access facilities, but that could be a short car journey. And then walking, public transport could be used beyond that. I'm not aware of the specific location of the bus stop, but on Balebrook Lane there are bus stops.
Can't comment during debate.
I'll just ask my transport colleague if they can be able to advise where the nearest bus stop is.
Unfortunately, we weren't consulted on this application as a highway authority, so I can't necessarily confirm exactly where the bus stops are, but there are bus routes on London Road West running through.
Councillor Hensel. I thought you wait first, Duncan. Councillor Gorley.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. I don't understand the thing about the HMOs. Could you, explain that in layman's terms and preferably in a straightforward way that I could understand? Thank you.
Yep, so within Bath there's an Article 4 directive, so that removes the right to change from C3 to C4. So C3, a single dwelling house, and C4, a small-scale HMO, up to 6 persons living together, sharing basic amenities. Because this site is close to, but because outside the boundary of Bath, that Article 4 directive doesn't apply. So there's a permitted change in the General Permitted Development Order to go from C3 to C4 without planning permission. So this is proposed as a C3 dwelling, but it could be changed to C4 without needing planning permission, because which is the same, which applies to anywhere outside of Bath, within Bath and North East Somerset.
Supplementary then. I get that. If this was to be potentially let out as an Airbnb, for example, or something like that, is there any way of stopping that, preventing that? Do we have any rules that enable us to prevent that happening in the future?
So the key issue in terms of that use would be whether it fell under C3 use or C4 use, provided it would be a short-term letting, as long as it fell under either C3 or C4 use, that would be lawful, because there is no use class at the moment for short-term residential accommodation. So yes, it could be. So if it was, say, an Airbnb, that could be lawful, but providing it still fell under the C3 or C4 use.
So just to get my brain completely around this, there is a potential then that this could be an HMO or an Airbnb because there are no rules against it. Is that the lay person's interpretation?
Yeah, so that would apply to any property in Bath. You could use a C3 as an Airbnb, providing it stayed within the use class of C3. In terms of this property, like anywhere outside Bath, it could be used as short-term letting, providing it fell within the C3 or C4 bracket. If it goes beyond that, then it needs planning permission.
Councillor Home.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question, explore the issue of privacy and the distinction between looking over and overlooking. Now, on the site visit, I could see clearly that you had a view looking over the nearby village and the properties, but I couldn't see from there into any window or garden from that distance. So, just to clarify, is overlooking in planning terms not the same as looking over? And in terms of loss of privacy, how far away are the nearest properties?
So overlooking, there's no specific definition of that. So overlooking could be looking over from above. Yeah, so that looking over from above would be overlooking. In terms of the nearest residential property, let me just, and if I could ask my colleague just to check the report, because it specifies in there the distance to the nearest neighbouring property. Okay, yeah, so the nearest residential properties are to the south, you can see there. The actual rear wall, or the rear of the properties, the buildings themselves, is a very significant distance from the barn. The closest property has a very long, substantial garden, so the very end of its garden is close to the building. But in terms of overlooking, there isn't overlooking from this, except for from one non-habitable, very narrow one, non-habitable window. But that was overlooking through existing trees to the very end of a very long garden. We wouldn't consider, so our policy requires it doesn't result in significant harm or substantial harm in terms of overlooking or loss of a means. We wouldn't consider that to be substantial.
Councillor Malloy.
Thank you. Yeah, I was surprised to hear there was no report needed from the highways officer. But I was looking at the plans again, and I'm just wondering, as there are 4 bedrooms, potentially there could be at least 4 cars, and where are they? Where is the parking for the 2 cars that it would be allowed, I assume? Or are there different rules because it's outside the housing boundary? And the other thing I noted from the report was that because it's not an adopted road, then all of the refuse collection has got to be at the junction with Balebrook, which from the barn is quite a way. So I'm just wondering, just bringing that to people's attention if they haven't noticed it already. That's quite a long way to be removing rubbish. Anyway, so could you answer about the parking situation? Thanks.
Yes, so in terms of parking, there are 3 parking spaces. So so you've got the parking area here. So that's consistent with the maximum parking standards in that location, which requires for this 4-bedroom dwelling 3 spaces. so in terms of the refuse collection, etc., you're correct. It is a significant distance to the highway where the refuge would be collected from. It's not uncommon for some properties that are in a sort of semi-rural context. If I can turn to, it's quite difficult to see, but there is an area at the end of the lane that would provide space for these bins to be located. So often in these instances, either obviously the occupants would do it, or they make arrangements for organised companies to move the bins for them and put them back. But for a building in a semi-rural location, it's not. That is often the case where bins have to be moved quite a significant distance, but there is space for them to be located.
Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. So I just have one more question. That's okay. So one thing that was start from the site visit was, when we arrived, was this huge construction that's ongoing. Is it called Vine House? Is that what it would be called?
It's a new house. The existing house is called Vine House.
The one that's under construction, the
really,
3 or 4 storey.
Yeah, I don't think it has a name at the.
Bath Springs.
There we go.
Okay. So that was quite overwhelming. The size of this sort of 3-storey building. I don't know what the relationship is between that and this, and I'm just trying to get my head around whether we should be considering this in isolation, or whether we should be looking at this as potentially the development of a housing estate rather than a single unit, and particularly where you've got barns in between the current development and this barn conversion. You've got barns in between, and I'm concerned about this cycle of permitted developments then becoming housing developments. So how should we view this as a site?
So we need to consider this separately to those other permissions. So in terms of the replacement for Vine House, that has obviously has permission. It was approved by committee as it was an officer overturn. So this proposal, what we're looking at, it's not a new building, it's the conversion of the existing building, and we have to consider that based on the policies relating to the conversion of rural buildings. There are some existing buildings, some smaller barns, and there's obviously the barn that's been built under prior approval. Any more buildings, if they were required, which my understanding is that they're not, would have to go through a prior approval application, and it would have to show justification that that it's necessary and needed for the purposes of agriculture, that building.
Sorry, now you've confused me. So we don't have to demonstrate it on this one, but the other barns, if they wanted to convert those, they would have to demonstrate a need for housing.
What I'm saying is, if they wanted to construct any further barns for agricultural use, that would require agricultural prior approval, and as part of that application they would need to demonstrate that that building is necessary for the purposes of agriculture on that holding.
Okay, but the barns that exist, there's nothing to stop them coming back and asking to convert those barns into housing as well, the existing barns.
Well, they would have to go
jump in there. You can apply for planning permission for any proposal at any time. There's no bar on that, and it will be judged on its own merits at the time of any application. So it's not. There's a very real danger that the committee get sucked into thinking about future proposals when actually what you have to judge today is the application in front of you.
Any more questions, anybody? Nobody? The item is open to debate. I'm looking for someone to start. Councillor Warren.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. To start, it's quite a tricky one, this one. We've heard an awful lot of reasons not to build this. And if we look at what happened last week and next week, the fact we're looking at, I think, today, and what's in front of us today, of all the reasons, it's very hard to find a legal reason that will stand up to refuse it, which is why I'm looking at it. Whether we like to or not is another point. So I think, I'm not happy to, but I think I'm going to move, I will, move the officer's recommendation.
Not seconded at all? Councillor Hazel seconding.
Just briefly, I agree with Councillor Warren. We have to apply the policies as they are, not what maybe we'd like them to be. And I can't see a strong enough reason to object, though we may hear that in the debate. This is a conversion of a redundant agricultural building. There is, in my opinion, no loss of privacy, and we're looking at it as a single application, and so I will second the motion.
Councillor Jackson.
I'm afraid I have to strongly disagree. This is not a redundant building. It is in use, it could be in future use, and as I said already, once changed into a dwelling, it's changed forevermore. So I appreciate subsequent applications will be judged on their own merits, but the fact that this is not a congenial use for the current owner, I don't feel is a valid reason for a development in the Greenbelt, which will have a significant impact on the general ambience of the area on Salisbury Hill. But the other thing is, I'm fed up of jumping out of the way of vehicles. It's just not acceptable that it's not accessible without a car.
Councillor Gorley.
Yeah, this is. I find this difficult because I've got a real issue with the windows in this. I mean, the view is fabulous, yet there aren't any windows on that side. But interestingly, the new barn that's being built, there are, I think I counted 6, 8, maybe 9 windows facing south. And I just find it very odd that a building that was only built 10 years ago, which apparently has no longer any use, is being replaced by one that's got lots of windows facing south. And, you know, to make this more suitable for agricultural use, all you'd have to do is make bigger doors, frankly. So I am slightly concerned about the future, I guess, is the other thing. The other thing, that this has got no concessions to solar panels or air source heat pumps or anything that I have seen. So I'm just wondering how sustainable it is. I mean, if it's got tiny windows, and I'm wondering what the heating will be. I don't think there's going to be a huge impact on the green belt because you have that fabulous view and lots of land around it. I don't think there's going to be a big impact on the footpath, which is very clearly defined. I am concerned that the garden for this is facing north rather than south. So I have a number of issues with this as a conversion, but also as the reason for doing it.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I agree. It's very difficult. I mean, as far as the MPPF is concerned, I mean, one executive property, 4-bedroom property, is not going to solve our housing problems in Baines. I would agree with the officer that it's compliant with RE6. Where I struggle is that I come to a different conclusion with policy NE2A, and I think it does affect the distinctive landscape setting of Salisbury Hill, and that would be, and certainly I think it therefore is an inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. It doesn't demonstrate any benefits to the area, so I really do have a problem with this application.
Any further speakers? Nobody indicate. Oh, Councillor.
I would agree with Councillor Hughes if there was an extension proposed to this building, but the building form is exactly the same proposed as it is now. So I'm happy to continue seconding the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Warren, do you want to sum up at all?
No, the only thing I would say, if this was for a new building, I think we'd be looking at a totally different argument. And if looking back, should it have been built 10 years ago? Perhaps that's another argument. However, we're looking at what we're looking at today, and the building's already there. So if it is a blot on the landscape, it's a blot on the landscape already. It's not going to be taken away. And you might have issues in the future, but we can't look at that today. We can only look at what's in front of us today. And I don't think there's any option but to vote in favour, to be honest.
Okay, we're going to vote on...
Sorry, can I ask...
That there, Sean, so I shouldn't really, but just 2 seconds.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the proposal, that's all. Are the people proposing any conditions to prevent further urbanisation or further developments on the site, or are they just proposing to accept it as is?
I don't think we can look in the future. I mean, we can't look at what may or may come next week or the week after. We can only look at what's in front of us. So what's in front of us is the application that we're looking at today, and I'd move the officer's recommendations as they are.
Those in favour, please.
Chair, sorry.
Voting. Those against? That's carried. That's that item concluded. Thank you. Councillor Jackson, so you need to withdraw this item. Come up next.
Mr. Chair, he voted it.
Okay, we're on the next item now. I'll give a few seconds for people to clear the room. You go now. Okay,
Chair, just to clarify, could you tell us the breakdown of the vote that was just taken place, just for clarity?
That's 5-4. Let the room clear a second. Okay, can I welcome Mark Cassidy? It's your first time here, I understand. Committee? Very welcome. For Meadowview Radstock, do you want to present your report, please?
To you today as they relate to Baines councillors. Okay, so the first one is at 4 Meadowview Radstock, and the proposal is to reduce a Lawson's cypress conifer by 2 metres on shape as it's near to power lines. 2, to remove a regenerating stump that's adjacent to the house as alleged to be causing damp inside the house, and to reduce a mixed hedge by 1 metre
location plan, I'm not sure I need to do too much. Location plan, Meadowview is to the south of Rudstock. Here's the tree locations. So the largest tree, A, is, as you can see, adjacent to the house. Similarly, small stump B is adjacent to the house, and the hedge just runs down between two neighbours and is only 4 metres long, really. So, some visuals. So that's the conifer. We may see that the work to reduce the conifer by 2 metres may appear to be drastic in proportion to the tree as it is, but you can see that it's growing up within power lines, and you can see that the tree is growing out tightly to the house. The next slide will show, actually, so C, you can see that best here. So C is just to reduce the hedge, including that holly tree, by 1 metre. And this is the regenerating stump to fell, which is adjacent to the front door. The trees are in the conservation area of Radstock, and a Section 211 notice has been brought forward to us as the planning authority. The options that we have in response to this would either be to issue a tree preservation order if the tree work was excessive and if the trees warranted it by virtue of their condition really, and locality and visual amenity. You can see that the case that I've brought to you today, those trees wouldn't be suitable for a tree preservation order, and that the tree work is reasonable and proportionate. So my officer's recommendation is one of no objection to the committee.
Are there any questions for the officer? None. Then we move to the debate. Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item, Waverley House Park Gardens, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the second case is brought to you for the same reasons. It relates to a Baines councillor. This is at Audley House, Park Gardens, Lower Western Bath. The proposal is G1, the reduction in height of 4 western red cedar, which are conifer trees, to allow more light to other trees, more significant trees in the garden. To reduce 2 Leylandii, which are conifer trees again, but growing as one crown, by 3 metres in height and 1 to 1.5 metres in width, and to fell 3 suppressed Lawson cypress, which are again conifers, to ground level. So there's a location plan. This is out in the east of the city, up near Victoria Park. Sorry, west of the city, near Victoria Park. Here's an aerial shot of the locations of the trees. They're all back within the rear garden of the property, not terribly visually visual from a public viewpoint. So G1, I've marked indicative pruning points, reducing 4 conifer trees. I find this consistent with what other people would do within their gardens in order to reduce wind loading and risks of the trees failing, and to increase light into the garden for various benefits. G2, you can see on the left, it forms 1 tree, 1 canopy, but it's 2 stems. So that's indicative reduction point of that tree to make it smaller. So that's
to Leylandii. And G3, you can really barely see them. They're suppressed little conifers under or within the shade of G2. And so those are to be lost. Similarly, as explained with the first case, I'm limited in my response to a Section 211 notice to tree works in a conservation area to either put a TPO on the trees to prevent the works if it's excessive, or to pass a no objection. And again, these trees aren't visible from a public location, and the work that's requested is proportionate and consistent with what other people would do. So I'm bringing a recommendation and no objection to the committee, please.
Any questions at all? No? Open for debate? Anybody? Peter Jackson?
I've got a Lawson cypress in my back garden, and I think this is a fully justified application, quite frankly, and I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Seconder, please. Those in favour? Duly carried. Thank you, Mark. Excellent job. Thank you. Move on to the appeals report now. Any comments, anybody? Nobody? That's useful. Then date of next meeting will be Wednesday, 18th of February, and site business on the 16th of February. Thank you very much. Meeting closed.